We've known each other for just about 10 years. You were my personal business and life coach for close to 4 years, a very meaningful part of my time in my career. And I'm so excited to have you on here because I think a lot of franchise founders, entrepreneurs, they don't understand what a coach does. How could a coach possibly help them when they don't know their industry, and what a meaningful impact that a coach can have. And I thought it was best to bring you on for you to share our experience together and what a coach does and how that differences from a therapist. So with that said, Sara, can you tell me what exactly does a life business coach do?
So a life or business coach or both, what they do is they help a client. What I like to do is I like to say I help clients live fearlessly. So a coach focuses on what's possible, and coaches work with people on their vision of where they want to be in their life, what quality of life they want, how they want their life to be living. It's like a design, a life by design. And so as a coach, you work with clients with setting goals, overcoming any fears or saboteurs or gremlins, developing self-confidence. You know about coaches, I do like to use the sports analogy. A coach, when somebody's in baseball or basketball or swimming or hiking or whatever it is, when they have a coach, the coach can help them tweak their style so they're more effective and more efficient and have more fun with it. However, a coach a big part of coaching is encouraging people that they can do it, because we have so many conversations in our head about how we can't. So many of my clients found themselves as entrepreneurs or owners, founders of companies, found themselves alone, like they were surrounded by people, their spouse or their board of directors or their C-suite or whatever it was. But they wanted to have someone they could talk to be honest with, that they didn't have to filter what they were saying.
Oh.
And it just, a coach gives a client the space to be real and to be who they need to be, to let go of the things that are not working for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked about the difference between a therapist. So my definition is generally that a coach is someone that works with a client on the future. They look at where they are today and then where they want to be in the future. And then together they fill in that gap to get there. Whereas with therapists, they look at the past and they ask questions like, well, why did that happen? And why was my relationship with this person like that? Coaches will rarely ask a client why. The only time you hear a why is when you're setting a goal. Why do you want this goal? But otherwise, why just it's not part of the conversation.
Right.
Because we're not fixing. Therapy is about fixing someone.
Mm-hmm.
And coaching is not about fixing. It's about focusing on what your strengths are, what you're best at, and really blowing those up, really making them as strong as possible. Because the things that an owner is not good at, they have a team to help support them.
Right.
So I think that's a big difference between coaching. Coaching looks at the future and therapy looks at the past.
Yeah. I remember you always telling me when you were my coach, telling me, look, I care about where you are today and where you want to go. And we would talk about the past from time to time, but that was so rare. It was a reference point of why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I remember you would kind of filter that out and just want to talk about, okay, where are we going? Here's where you are today, where you want to go tomorrow, and let's fill in that gap, right?
Because when you hear a negative voice, when anyone hears a negative voice in their head, it's usually a judgment. And it's usually a judgment about the past or a future that hasn't happened. So that is often why in coaching you don't focus on the past, because the past has already happened. You have no control and you can't change that. So it's really about what can you do to make a difference in your life.
Right. Yeah. I know I brought this up to you when you and I first started working together. So for everyone knows, you and I actually met through, let's put it this way, I guess the most famous life coach there is on the planet. We'll just leave it at that. They can figure out who we're talking about. And
yeah,
I remember asking you, Sara, how can you possibly help me in my business? I am in franchising and sports. Do you have any background in franchising in sports. And you said no, and it doesn't matter. I would love for you to share with the audience why it doesn't matter for a coach, that they don't need to know the industry and have intimate knowledge about the business that their client is in.
Sure. So there is a saying that 80% of success is psychology and 20% is our mechanics. So when we started working together, I trusted that you knew the mechanics. Like I didn't have to know the mechanics. I happened to have an MBA. I had been in business for 20, 25 years. So there were some basic foundational things I knew I was confident about and I could count on. And I think that's what happens is that what I also had been trained in was coaching, was focusing on what was your psychology, what was your emotional state, what was really important that would get you that 80% so you could open up the avenue to that 20% mechanics and success. So I'd say that's probably what it is. I don't have to be, I've worked with realtors, I've worked with fitness facility owners, I've worked with hair salon owners, oh my God, movie producers, just goes on and on. They say to be an expert in an area, you spend 10,000 hours. I haven't spent 10,000 hours. But what I do know is that everyone has to have the right psychology to achieve their goals, their dreams, their hopes, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I would say as your client, there was actually an advantage for you not to have intimate knowledge about my business or franchising, because it felt like it opened up the kind of questions that you would ask me, and you didn't have any preconceived notions or any judgments about my business because it wasn't your background. Yeah, you did trust that I understood the mechanics of my business. I never asked you, how do I do this running a sports franchise, or how do I go get more franchisees specifically? But we would talk about, if I want to talk about the growth of the business, you and I would work through some great coaching tools. And I wanted to share, if you would share with the audience, I think some of my favorite coaching tools I wrote down that you helped me with. Number one is annual goal setting. So I understand you've developed this kind of momentum manifesto, so to speak. You and I would do this every year towards the end of the year or the beginning of the year. And it doesn't really matter when you do it. If you haven't done one for this year, do it now. And can we talk about some of the content of this manifesto and some of the things that you would put me through, because it was extremely powerful?
Absolutely. I think the Momentum Manifesto is life-changing, because the reason I say that is that many times people approach the end of the year, and often actually people approach the end of the year and don't plan next year. They just, everybody gets wrapped up in the holidays and they don't have time. They think they don't have time. So what happens is they plan the next year in January, and their plan gets done January 30th, let's say. The challenge with that is you're planning for 12 months, but now you have to do the business in 11. So you really want to plan in December, November, even November. You're making a plan. It's not going to be perfect. It's an estimate. So you could do it in October. There are many corporations that do start the process early.
Sure.
But making this plan with the Momentum Manifesto is giving yourself a map. If you're driving from Florida to Seattle, you're probably not just and you're driving, you're not flying. You're not going to just get on the road and go car go. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to go to this road, or you're going to get it all mapped out. And that's what we really need to do with our goals for the year, because when you're prepared with that, then your decision making is much easier, much clearer. And it just gives you the right triggers to make the right choices. And so the manifesto is kind of interesting. It looks at this year, 2023. It's called Momentum Manifesto 2024, but it looks at 2023. It asks you, what were magical moments in this year? What was a fabulous experience that you had? What was something, that really worked well? Frank, can you think of something that was magical for you this year?
Oh gosh, easily. Starting the podcast was by far the most magical moment, because I didn't see it coming.
Right. I think that that was truly magical, because you're so excited about this. I'm so excited for your listeners, or viewers, whatever. But so it's those magical moments that you want to kind of memorialize, so that you feel the feelings, see how you made the choice, how it came about. And so it looks at what are magical moments. And then it does have another question in the beginning of the manifesto is, what did you achieve? So it does recognize there's some things that are maybe not magical. However, there's a lot of things you may have achieved in 2023. So
Sure.
you want to look at those. The next thing it does is it looks at what are the things or decisions you made in 2023 that you'd like to repeat, so that you can notice a pattern and use that pattern if it's positive. And the next section actually asks you, what were the challenges you faced in 2023? And what would you like to not happen again? What are some decisions you would like to not make again? So that the whole manifesto is about awareness. It's really so that you're approaching life with 2 feet on the ground, your eyes open, your heart open, and being aware of the choices. So often, I think that's why often people we call them New Year's resolutions, and they never happen. It's because they just make them from the top of their head. It's just, a whim. And and then they forget they've made it. And a year later, it's like, oh, I was going to do that. The manifesto actually takes you through this process of looking at this year, looking at next year, and creating a plan, picking out what your goals are for next year, and identifying what's something you could do immediately on those goals, or what are some major actions or steps that you would want to take throughout the year. And like, I'll have clients chunk it down into, you've got this big goal, what are some actions you can do? And now looking at those actions, which ones would you do first? And then in which month would you do them? So it's just a blueprint. And, as I say to everyone, it's just a blueprint. It's just a blueprint. And if you get to that task and you want to do it, or you don't want to do it, that because you've learned something. Remember, every day is different because we learn something about ourselves, or we learn something about our business that now changes the quality of that decision.
Sure.
So it's really taking a look at that. And the manifesto is just brilliant with that.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.